Hi, my name is Jada Howard, and I am a student at New Harmony High School in New Orleans and a Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Club member. Today, we'll be having a conversation about the investigative documentary film Descendant, which won the Special Jury Award for Creative Visions at the 2022 Sundance Film Festival. In Descendant, documentary filmmaker Margaret Brown returns to her hometown of Mobile, Alabama, to document the search for a historic discovery of the Clotilda, the last known ship to arrive in the United States, illegally carrying enslaved Africans. After a century of secrecy and speculations, the 2019 discovery of the ship turns attention toward the descendant community of Africatown and presents a moving portrait of a community actively grappling with and fighting to preserve their heritage while examining what justice looks like today. Our panel today is the film director Margaret Brown, Vita Tunstall Robbins, a direct descendant of Polly Allen, and subject of the film, Dr. Kern Jackson, a folklorist and co-writer and co-producer of the film, and NASA Troutman, founder and leader of the Big We. Welcome to all, and thank you for being here with us today. This first question is for Director Margaret. What drove you to make this film, and what did you find to be the biggest challenge and biggest reward of the process?
Hi, thank you for that introduction. The biggest challenge was pretty much, well, I started the film actually because I made another film 15 years ago called The Order of Myths, where I found out about the Clotilda, which is the last slave ship to come to the United States. And that was actually, the Clotilda was in that film from 15 years ago. And, I had Kern Jackson and I just never stopped talking about the Clotilda and all the issues that surrounded it in the South, and specifically the town where I'm from, Mobile, Alabama. And then I guess like 14 years later, or no, at that point, it was like 11 years later, there was an announcement that the Clotilda had been found, and it hadn't been found when we made the film in 2007 and 2008. It was sort of like people talked about it, but it had never been discovered, supposedly. And there was an announcement, it was found, and I went to Mobile to start filming. It did not turn out to be the Clotilda, but 2 years later, the ship actually was found. So we were filming like 2 years before the ship was found because of the first reported finding that was not actually the ship. And I guess my biggest, I guess like humility was sort of the biggest thing I learned from this, because I'm a white person and this is a Black story. And when I started making the movie, a film, often you don't really know what it is when you start. And I thought the Mayer family, which is a family that's in The Order of Myths, the film I made 15 years before this film, at the time of its completion, they were in the other film. They were the enslavers who brought, their family brought the 110 enslaved people from Africa to the United States. And I thought they would be part of the story, and it turns out they did not speak and were not a part of the story. So when I realized that this was a story about the African-American experience, I guess, humility was both the biggest challenge, but also the greatest gift, because it was a huge collaboration with the people you see on the screen, Kern and Vita, making this film. And, so that was also the biggest gift.
Dr. Kern, thank you so much for being here with us today. What inspired you to start recording the Africatown community's stories? What's the role of folklore within this community and the importance of preserving this history?
Well, the first answer is, as a folklorist, I typically try to do what I'm told. And I had a couple of elders who, when I was trying to do a project on Carnival and Mardi Gras, told me that I needed to sort of focus on something that perhaps was a little more important. In terms of what is the role of folklore, folklore sort of encompasses anything like culture and process. So it's wide open in terms of its defining. Some people like to think of it as like domestic anthropology, but what it does, I think, particularly in this project, is sort of levels the playing field of the historical record, right? You can explore oral history, which people purport as truth, or you can study things like myth. And I think that gives a lot more depth and texture and nuance to events such as the Clotilde coming over from West Africa and bringing these people to the United States. Now, in terms of preservation, that can be really helpful because until I guess the 80s or the 90s, no one except for Emma Langdon Roche had really written anything about the Clotilde Africas, because Hurston's Barracoon was buried under a publisher's rejection pile. And what I think folklore sometimes does with preserving history is it gives common people an opportunity to sort of share what they know on an everyday basis and put other folks in position to formally explore it. So that's what I think folklore does with historic preservation.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Vita. It's great to meet you. What does it mean to you to be a descendant, and how did the release of the film impact Africa Town's community?
Hey, Jada, thank you for having me here. It's nice to meet you too. It's the film has impacted this community because it's brought so much attention to it, but also the fact that we have a folklorist like Dr. Jackson. There are pieces of our history, or I'll speak for myself, there's pieces of my history that I've known, but being able to hear from Dr. Jackson, who's collected all of our history, I've been able to piece some things together that I didn't even know, or I knew incorrectly, or just knew pieces of. But I think it's so important, and I'm so honored to be able to know exactly where my people came from. I'm honing in on even more where I came from. I know that my people came over on the last slave ship, and there are so many people who look like me who don't have any idea when their people got here, what part of Africa they came from. But for me to be able to trace it back to West Africa and to learn more about how our people were captured there and where they were captured from, when I go to Africa, I may be able to go exactly to where I came from. So it's because of this film that I've learned as much as I have.
This is also for you, Dr. Kern and Margaret Brown. After the film was released, the Mayer family issued their first ever statement acknowledging the Clotilda and condemning their ancestor Timothy Mayer's actions. Vita and Dr. Kern, let's start with you. What was your reaction to the statement?
My reaction, the Vita pause, I know. When I saw the statement, the timing was just really suspicious to me. It's the fact that they haven't spoken for all these decades, and then the film has been released all over the world. You know, it's been able to be seen through different film festivals. But when it came home to roost is curiously when the statement was made. It came out with a request for a little sympathy because they lost a family member. I'm just really cautious about the motivations, and I haven't felt any sense of relief or any sense of connection. So personally, the statement has not resonated with me.
I agree with you, Vita. I think context is everything. And a lot of times with these PR things, you have to rely on what I call other people's leavings. We've been talking about Clotilde for 140 some odd years, holding festivals on property that these folks own and rent to environmental polluters and rent and let be used by slumlords. And I think there's been no real conversation about that, and doing a press release instead of talking to your neighbors isn't very democratic. When we're here and we're open for conversation. Margaret, I don't know how many times Margaret made overtures to the mayors to participate in the project. So you get what you get and don't give a fit when people talk about you. So the press release is was a poor attempt at participating in a much needed conversation, as far as I'm concerned.
Margaret, we see in the film that they declined to be interviewed. What do you think changed?
They actually were not, they did not decide to be interviewed. I mean, I think what changed is the film came out on Netflix and they knew that millions of people all over the world would see it or were seeing it that first weekend. And that's also when the statement came out, was like 2 days after the Netflix release. And the power of Netflix is, you know, you can watch it in the whole world for a very long time. So I think that was what motivated that. And yeah, I mean, I agree with what Kern and Vita are saying. Like, I think there was many opportunities for them to speak to me, someone they know, because the family was in my other movie. And actually Helen Mayer traveled with that film to Sundance and then to other countries and spoke publicly about being from a family that brought the Clotilda to the United States. So I thought she would talk to me and maybe naively when something is about reparations or about any kind of justice, I think the conversation changes, because the other film was about Mardi Gras, although it did have the Clotilda in it. So, you know, I was disappointed, and I agree with what Kern and Vita said, but I also remain hopeful that something will change, because you know, the film continues on and the work of the community continues on. So I think there's a lot to respond to.
Anasa, thank you for being here with us today. Could you talk to us more about your work with the Big We and how storytelling can be used as a way to heal communities? Why is telling these stories so important?
Of course. Thank you for having me, Jada. So the Big We is really a storytelling ecosystem, and we think about what stories we need to tell to be able to help us all become more attuned to love and to community and to belonging. And also, like, what do you do with those stories? So once you have these amazing stories like Descendant, how do you engage in community around the themes of the story? And how do you actually translate those themes into action? Because a transformative story isn't transformative if people are acting the same the next day, if policies are the same the next day, if finances are the same the next day. So really it's about how we choose the stories and how we allow those stories to transform us from the inside out on the individual and the societal level. I think one of the things that I think about all the time is Maya Angelou's quote that says, what did she say? There is no greater burden or something than an untold story. There's no greater agony than an untold story sitting inside you. And so I think stories are important because they can be healing both to the teller and to the people who are listening to the story. It is really important and powerful to be able to fully express yourself. One of the things that left me with this movie is the stories about hearing folks say, like, we all knew, but our grandmas and our grandpas told us we better not say it out loud in public. And like the pain of having to hide your history, the pain of having to hide your identity, and the truth that you know everyone is carrying. There is like great personal liberation in being able to express that story. But also for us, like I had only been to Mobile twice in my life before watching this movie. And the way that it healed and liberated me as a pathway forward to be able to live in a new way and to be able to have a different kind of freedom, and also to think what it looks like to live in community. Because when you look at this movie and you think about the history of the Clotilda and the families that generated from the Clotilda, there's not just a story about interpersonal or a personal story. There's a story about the economy. There's a story about the environment. There's a story about structural racism. There's a story about belonging and love. And that is those are the stories that we need to be listening to right now, because that's the conundrum that we're all in, as everyone's like, oh, wow, I didn't realize the world was crazy. Well, now we all know. And I feel like the stories like the Clotilda story are the ones we should be watching and listening to help teach us how to live in the future in a different way.
Okay, that was really good. Dr. Kern and Anasa, lately we've seen increased efforts to suppress Black stories and history. What are the potential consequences, and how can we help share and protect these stories?
Yeah, I'm gonna let Kern speak to the consequences more, but I think the continuation of subjugating and hurting people and having them not have the space, the resources, the time, and the right, and the feelings of worthiness to be able to live their fullest life, to me. But I think the remedy is like what my parents did. I didn't learn any of this stuff in school either. And folks are talking as if the suppression of Black stories is new, but it's not. It's actually in a tale as old as time, right? And so my mom and dad gave me book reports to do in the summertime. I didn't learn about Sojourner Truth or Marcus Garvey or any of these folks in school. I learned about it at home. And so even though these books might be banned at school, they're not banned at the bookstore or in the library or on the internet. And so if you're feeling like there's stories that you want to have access to that somebody in the legislature told you couldn't have it at school, like, we spend 8 hours a day at school, but we spend the rest of them hours somewhere else. And so if you want the information, go get it. Go get it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Anasa. I mean, I'm trying to still figure out what a divisive concept is. You got these laws about just divisive concepts on the books in 32 states now. And really, it's problematic, right? Because the lack of free speech leads to some people dying and being killed. So the consequences are dire, right? I got little children and grandchildren, right? Little brown grandchildren. And when you start talking about, well, this is what you can't say, and you can't say your truth when this country is based on it, we got a problem. And you know, you can work your problems out with nice, calm folks like on the Zoom call, or you're gonna have a whole other type of problem. So I think people need to calm down and not restrict free speech, talking about what is divisive when we have the historical record right before us, which articulates what happens when you restrict knowledge in school or out.
I just want to add one thing. For a nation that prides itself on honor and freedom and all those words that we say, it is an actual lie to remove some of these stories from the record. We are literally lying to children about what is the reality of our history. And that is the most dangerous thing that I can think of.
I want to add something too. And denying our speech, denying what we have to say, just amplifies the other side. So, you know, that there is somebody, the other side obviously has all the free speech they desire, but it just totally cuts us off. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say we allow everybody to speak, everybody free speech, but only one side is heard. I didn't say that like I wanted to, but you get my point.
Yeah, I completely understand. Vida, in this film, we see you alongside other descendants actively organizing the community to call for justice and determine what the future of Africa Town should look like. What is happening in the community now?
I'm a lot more plugged in than I had been. And there has already been a lot of work going on before this film even showed up. But because of the film, there's been a lot more organization and a lot more resources are provided to us to connect us to the people who actually can help to move us forward. So I feel momentum going forward, and it has a lot to do with the film being produced and the light shining on Africa Town. People are paying attention. People are offering to help. So people have a lot of skills and resources. They don't know how they can help. So we just put them in our pocket and, you know, just hold on. We're gonna get to you as soon as we figure out exactly what we need. We're gonna call you. But a lot of people, there's a lot of interest in not just a story. I don't like to call this a story because it's not just entertainment, but I'll say the story just because it's what has gotten people involved. But there's a lot of interest in just the humanity of the people in Africa Town. So people in the world are a lot better than you think. But this film has brought them all forward.
I would like to hear from each of you about what you hope viewers would take from seeing Descendants, and how we can all support the Africatown community now.
I'll go first. I think, Jada, you're in New Orleans, right? I mean, y'all do second line, right? I think it would be good to sort of join efforts with Mobile, culturally speaking, and do cultural second line, because y'all face the same types of issues over there at the base of the Mississippi that we do over here at the base of the Mobile and Tennessee rivers. Y'all got brownfields over there in New Orleans. We got brownfields in Africatown. And so I just would like for people to make a case for creating cohorts that spread beyond our city boundaries, right? Especially among you young folks. Like, y'all get on them Twitters and Twitch, and all types of stuff starts happening. And it makes me, it gives me hope. So that's what I'm hoping with respect to viewers of Descendant, that they click on descendantfilm.com, that they get involved with the things we've identified as impact issues that need amplified. And we all need money, which is why we have Anasa here. She's raising money to help with the advocacy options that are going on in Africatown. And Jada, if I don't get a chance to thank you, I'm very proud of you. Thank you very much for having me.
I will echo Kern's statements. I think the power of this story is not just the power in the story, but the power in what the story will lead us to. Africatown is a beautiful story because it literally is like a microcosm of the African-American experience in one little, right? And what it can teach us, not only about what's happened in the past, but what we can actually create in the future, to me is the most powerful thing. And I hope that people are willing to take this film and have it be a place of reimagining of what it means to live in community, of what it means for folks to be self-determined, of what investment looks like in communities, about what wellness looks like, and to be able to say, like, there's actually another way for us to interact with the economy, with the environment, with each other. And I believe that this community can teach us all the ways of the future. And send money. Thanks.
I wanted to echo a little bit of what Anasa says. There's a line in the film from an elder in the community, and he says he's at EJI in Montgomery, which is the lynching memorial, and he's watching all these people walk out who seem very moved, but some of them are posing for pictures. They sort of, there's a combination of like people being moved, but also like, this is, oh, we're going to pose for pictures next to this plaque, and he sort of looks at it, and he says, his name is Anderson Flynn, and he says, this could be a form of entertainment for them. And he's hoping that's not what will happen, but he says, but what will they do when they leave? And I feel like that about the film. Like, the film is here to show you a reimagining of what things could be. How are you going to contribute to that? What are the ways, large and small, that you could watch the film? It could be a conversation with your grandparents. It could be sitting again at your grandparents' feet and asking them about how they grew up, or saying, or, challenging some of their beliefs, even saying, have you watched this film? What did you think of it? There's so many ways to move forward from what you learn there. And that's what I hope. I hope that people really think about, I saw this thing, it really moved me. Now, what do I do? How do I make that actionable?
And I think I would like to echo a little bit of what everybody said here, but one of the things that is important is to continue the story. Perpetuating our story perpetuates your own story. Like, think about the fact that we had all this history, and it was within our family. We talked about our history, but the world didn't recognize it. And to just know that Black history is not just Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks, that we're living Black history. And when you look at your own community, and I'm talking specifically to you, Jada, when you look at your own community, you are Black history also. You just have to find it. What you do today is tomorrow's Black history. So you find out what is happening in your community, in your own home, in your own family. You got some firsts in your family. You are probably the first to do something. So it's just important to continue to share that and talk about that. So that's what I hope Descendant has been able to show everybody, is that continuing to tell your story is one day going to be a big deal. Also, contributing is not just financial, it's contributing to history, like I just said, but also you have resources and talents. Everybody does. People are not here in Mobile. They wonder how they can help. They have all kinds of technology. For instance, here, we're helping you by being here. You're helping us by allowing us to tell this story and to talk about it. And we are not in the same zip code. So keeping in mind all that technology and all the resources and all the things you can do in your community is what I want everybody to take away from here. Also, you can go to descendantfilm.com, and there's a collection of the main groups that are active in Africatown. They do different things. So it's just important to figure out what matters the most to you, what you care the most about. You can help in any way, but connect with those groups and just follow. And that's how you can keep up with what's going on in Africatown and how you can help. And thank you so much for having us here. I'm so happy to meet you and so happy to be a part of this discussion.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say thank you again to all of you for talking with us today. And please visit the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Speak Truth to Power website for additional resources about the film and to register for a live panel discussion about how to talk about race in the classroom, which will be held on March 10th at 11:30 Eastern Time. And I'd like to say thank you again to our panelists for talking with us today and giving us your opinions and thoughts about the situation.
Thank you, Jada.
Thank you, Jada.
Thank you, Jada.
Thank you, Jada. You're amazing.